My in-laws laughed at me across the dinner table, calling me useless and a burden in their house, right in front of everyone. My father-in-law leaned in and said I didn't belong there. I looked around, stayed calm, because none of them knew the truth. I was the actual owner of that house. I've never been the kind of person who needed attention to feel secure. I kept my life simple, my habits quiet, and my ambitions mostly to myself. By the time I got married, I had already built a stable career in real estate investments. I wasn't flashy about it though. I didn't wear expensive brands or talk about money, and I preferred blending into the background rather than proving anything to anyone. When I married my wife, I believed I was gaining not just a partner, but a family that would value respect over appearances. She was close to her parents, and it made sense at the time for us to move into what I thought was their home, a large, elegant house in a prime area that reflected their taste for status and presentation. At first, everything seemed normal. There was the usual adjustment period, small awkward moments, polite conversations, learning each other's routines. But it didn't take long for me to notice a pattern. The way they spoke to me wasn't openly hostile, but it carried a quiet edge. My father-in-law would ask about my work with a tone that suggested he already had a low opinion of it. Real estate, huh? That's unstable. Not a real profession if you ask me. My mother-in-law would make comments disguised as concern. Our daughter was used to a certain standard of living. I hope you can maintain that. I would nod, smile, and move on. I didn't feel the need to defend myself, but the remarks didn't stop, they evolved. What started as subtle digs turned into casual dismissals. If something broke in the house, it was somehow my fault. If there was a financial discussion, my opinion was ignored. During family gatherings, I became the easy target for jokes. He's still figuring things out, they'd say, laughing as if I wasn't sitting right there. Each incident alone was small, almost insignificant. But together, they built something heavier, something harder to ignore. My wife noticed some of it, but she always downplayed it. They don't mean it, she would say. That's just how they talk. I wanted to believe her, so I stayed quiet. I told myself that respect takes time, that eventually they would see me for who I am. But instead of improving, things only got worse. One evening, my father-in-law invited a few business associates over for dinner. It was supposed to be a formal gathering, the kind where everyone dresses well and pretends everything is perfect. I sat at the table, listening as they discussed investments, markets, and properties, topics I knew well but wasn't invited to speak on. Then, out of nowhere, one of his friends asked me what I did. Before I could answer, my father-in-law laughed. He's still trying to find his place, he said. Living here gives him time to think. The table erupted in polite laughter. I forced a smile, but something inside me tightened. That wasn't just a joke, it was a statement, a deliberate attempt to define me in front of others. Days after. That night, the tone shifted again. The disrespect became more direct, more public. My sister-in-law started making comments about how I contributed nothing. My mother-in-law stopped pretending her remarks were harmless. A man should provide, she said one morning, not depend on others. Every word was designed to chip away at my dignity. And then came the dinner that changed everything. The house was full that night, relatives, friends, people I barely knew. The table was set perfectly, the atmosphere carefully curated to impress. I took my seat quietly, already expecting the usual tension. It didn't take long. My mother-in-law started it, smiling as she asked, "So, any progress in life these days?" A few people chuckled. I kept my composure. Then my sister-in-law added, "Or are you still enjoying the free lifestyle here?" More laughter. I could feel every pair of eyes on me. I stayed silent, hoping it would pass. But it didn't. My father-in-law placed his glass down and leaned forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "Let's be honest," he said. "You're living in a house you didn't earn, eating food you didn't pay for. Don't you think it's time you proved you belong here?" The room went quiet, the kind of silence that makes everything heavier. My chest felt tight, not because of what he said, but because of how easily everyone accepted it. No one defended me. No one even looked uncomfortable. That was the moment, the peak, the breaking point. I could have argued. I could have revealed everything right there. But instead I stood up, calmly pushed my chair back, and walked out without saying a single word. They thought my silence meant defeat. They thought I had nothing to say. What they didn't know was that my silence was a decision. That night, I didn't go back to the bedroom. I sat in my car for hours, thinking, not about revenge, but about clarity. For years, I had allowed their perception of me to exist unchecked. Not because I agreed with it, but because I didn't care enough to challenge it. But now it wasn't just about me, it was about respect. There was something they didn't know. Years before I even met my wife, I had purchased that very property as an investment. It was handled through a third-party firm, my name kept completely out of sight. When my in-laws rented it, they had no idea who the actual owner was. I had recognized the address the moment I first visited, but I chose to say nothing. I didn't want power to define the relationship. But now, everything had changed. The next morning, I made a call. No anger, no hesitation, just clear instructions. I asked my lawyer to review the rental agreement and begin the termination process. It was all legal, all clean. No shortcuts, no tricks. Within days, the notice was delivered. Confusion spread quickly in the house. I watched it unfold quietly. My father-in-law was on the phone constantly, trying to reach the property owner. My mother-in-law was stressed, my sister-in-law unusually silent. My wife looked at me, searching for answers I hadn't given yet. A meeting was scheduled. When I walked into that room and saw them sitting there, waiting to meet the person who had the power to change everything, I felt something I hadn't felt before. Not anger, not satisfaction, but control. Their expressions shifted the moment they realized it was me. Shock, disbelief, then realization. No one spoke at first. I took a seat, looked directly at my father-in-law and said calmly, "You wanted me to prove I belong here." The weight of that moment was undeniable. Everything they had said, every insult, every laugh, it came rushing back, but now the situation was completely reversed. Apologies followed, excuses, attempts to explain their behavior. But the truth didn't need explanation, it was already clear. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult them back. I didn't need to. The shift in power spoke louder than anything I could say. I gave them a reasonable deadline to vacate the property. No drama, no humiliation, just a decision. For the first time, they understood what it felt like to be on the other side of judgment. And for the first time, they saw me not as someone to dismiss, but as someone they had completely misjudged. Respect, I realized, isn't something you demand. It's something people recognize when they can no longer ignore the truth. That experience changed the way I look at people, and more importantly, the way I look at myself. For a long time, I believed that staying quiet was the best way to maintain peace. I thought that if I ignored the disrespect, it would eventually fade, that people would come to understand my worth without me having to prove it. But I learned the hard way that silence doesn't always protect your dignity. Sometimes, it allows others to define your value on their terms. What hurt the most wasn't the insults themselves. It was how easily they came, how comfortable people were treating me like I didn't matter. And the truth is, there are many people out there going through the same thing. Being underestimated. Being judged based on what others can see on the surface. Being made to feel small in spaces where they should feel respected. But here's what I realized. You don't need to shout to prove your worth, and you don't need to seek validation from people who have already decided not to see you clearly. Real strength is knowing who you are, even when everyone around you doubts it. It's having the patience to build your value quietly, and the courage to reveal it when it truly matters. Power isn't just about money or status. It's about self-respect. It's about setting boundaries, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Because the moment you start accepting disrespect as normal, you begin to lose a part of yourself that's very hard to get back. In my case, I didn't choose revenge out of anger. I chose it as a form of clarity. Not to hurt them, but to show them the truth they refused to see. And sometimes, that's enough. Sometimes, the strongest statement you can make is simply changing the situation without saying a word. If you've ever been in a position where people looked down on you, where your efforts went unnoticed, or where your presence was taken for granted, remember this. Your current situation does not define your actual value. And just because people don't recognize your worth today, doesn't mean they won't be forced to see it tomorrow. Daughters, don't rush to prove yourself. Don't waste energy arguing with people who have already made up their minds about you. Focus on building yourself quietly and consistently, because when the time comes, your actions will speak louder than anything you could ever say. And if this story connected with you in any way, if you've ever felt underestimated or disrespected, take a moment and reflect on your own journey. Drop a comment and share your experience. I read every single one. Hit the like button if you believe self-respect should never be compromised. And subscribe to the channel for more real, powerful stories that remind you of your true worth.